Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for joining in this Zoom meeting chat in these very, very strange times. And what a way we're all communicating now that we never thought we would be. My name is Paula Rogers, and I'm the CEO and founder of the Admiral Hospitality Recruitment Group. And I'm delighted today that following weeks and weeks of watching what one can only describe as a very humbling experience of what I can see as a real legacy unfold, I have asked a gentleman to join me to talk about that. And the said gentleman is Frank Bothwell, who is the CEO and founder of Thomas Franks, a beautiful independent caterer, who are a family business who are absolutely totally and utterly passionate about their people. Every feed you see, every social media you see, it's always about people. I'm not going to ramble on anymore though, because the man who's able to do far more justice to this fabulous foundation that's also been set up is Frank himself. So without further ado, I would like to hand over to Frank to ask you to share with us, Frank, a little bit about you, your company, and then moving on to the foundation, please.
Well, that's very kind of you, and thank you all for joining us. So for those of you who haven't heard of Thomas Franks, we've been trading for 15 years as a food service caterer, and we were just approaching about 60 million turnover before the crisis struck. And it's best described, our business was best described as going from 60 million to zero in about 15 minutes. So we decided quickly to get together and try to do something that would give back during the lockdown. And I approached all my regional directors and heads of countries and asked them to consider coming up with a plan where we fed local communities, particularly those in food poverty. And so on the first weekend of lockdown, we had this discussion, and we started trading on the Monday after our first hub kitchen, which was Rendcombe College, with a fabulous guy called Dean, who was the catering manager. And he knocked on doors in the community and went around all the local leaders in the village and offered free food and bread to those that were suffering in isolation or perhaps suffering in food poverty. And it grew from there, and we formed TF Feeding Communities, and we hoped that over the next few weeks we'd deliver a few thousand meals across the regions of Thomas Franks. And as of today's date, that number has gone over 110,000 chilled meals and food packages to over 48 charities in the UK and in Ireland and in Portugal and in Malta, where we operate. And I think, looking back on my own team's leadership of feeding communities, the comments that have come back from those individuals, take John Grimmer in Malta, for example. He said to me that this project saved him and his team from lots of mental health issues, and it gave them a purpose to get out and do something. And I believe that that's what this did. I'm so proud of them. I think what they've achieved in a very quick period of time let them believe that there was hope for the future. So that was basically TF Feeding Communities. But I must say, I'm very proud of the whole industry. There isn't one company I've come across that hasn't done something, and there are many that have done much, much more. And I think it shows the kindness that's been amplified during this crisis by the catering community, which after all is a bunch of very intelligent, kind, ethical, moral, upstanding people. And I'm proud of the industry. And I think that that's one thing we have to make sure continues as a legacy, is that this amplified kindness, this ethical manner of trading must continue.
Absolutely. Thank you. I think that dittoing everything you've just said, our industry really, really, really does stand out. And you can see the great work that's been done across it. There's people really do come together, and there's such formidable people in our industry that really do care enormously. And very interesting too that the comments about the mental health and how it really, really helped. And of course, that's so prevalent in these unprecedented times as well, about how that can really have an impact. And Frank, in terms of all the teams that you have, how did you manage to get a team of caterers to deliver this amazing provision for feeding the communities, the frontline NHS staff, the disadvantaged, and as you said, not just in the UK, and Malta and Portugal and Ireland. How did you do that?
Well, it took some persuasion, but I think deep down, when you lay out a plan and you provide detail behind it, people do understand it. But simply put, I got a phone call from my mother, who's 77, lives on her own, following the rules in Yorkshire, and she said to me, "You've got 165 kitchens doing nothing. Get off your arse and do something with them." So effectively, that was the business plan. So speaking to our team, we knew there was a need to provide food aid for vulnerable communities, and we knew we had these 165 plus kitchens. And we reached out to our clients, and the regional directors reached out to their clients as well, and 30 of them came back and said, "You can have our kitchens, no charge. Make use of them." So we then had to try and find some money to make those kitchens work, and that was difficult, but we raised about £200,000 in about 7 days from donors and clients and certain charities. We put some money in ourselves. Lorraine thinks it's probably cost us another 200,000. She's our FD, but we don't talk about that. We just ignore that point every time she mentions it. But that money allowed us to do 100,000 meals, and we set up a Virgin giving page, which we can share out with people after this call, and that's raised more money, which has allowed us to continue feeding. And we're still doing tens of thousands of meals a week through London and through hubs in Scotland and to the NHS in Berkshire in particular. So it's continuing. So that money was vital, and it came without question from kind people that wanted to ensure that food poverty was eradicated, and the NHS, who have been amazing, were looked after.
Fantastic. And it's incredible that in such tough times that, all these clients just grouped together and said, yes, have these kitchens, and the donations as well. It just goes to show that in these times, people are really taking account of how difficult it is in food poverty. And tell me, how did you manage to inspire and motivate a big group? I think you mentioned that you had about 148 volunteers of your teams. How did you manage to motivate all these furloughed staff to work day in, day out for this charitable cause?
Well, there's two things to that. One is that when they were shown the level of food poverty that exists in this country, and we'll give you a good example. I think Kenny Leamy's on the screen there from Scotland, head of Scotland for Thomas Franks. Kenny phoned me almost in tears. I think he was in tears actually when he delivered food aid to a local community, and it hit home that this is happening in this country, this wonderful, rich country of ours. So people, when they saw the need for it, they were fully invested in continuing to do it. But our head office is in a brewery, so we constantly feed the teams with ale and English Prosecco, and we deliver that out every few weeks. So we're bribing them with alcohol, which is obviously a very good thing, and we're also allowing them to be able to mould the charity they're doing to their own region and find other ways of doing things. So, for example, Lee Fowler, who's the regional director for the Midlands, decided to do a hot curry night delivery with beer, obviously, to one village that was suffering food poverty in Oxfordshire. You wouldn't think it, would you? Mm. And we created this wonderful curry evening, vegan, vegetarian and meat, and we plated it up in the village hall and delivered it to each door to 100 families that were suffering food poverty. He wanted to do that. It meant something to him. And all he wanted was the funding for it. So we found the funding, and he felt able to craft his own charity. So I think you've got to let them run their own business. I mean, why employ the best people and tell them what to do? Just give them the ideas and let them fly.
Fantastic. And it really does show too that all of your people really did pick the baton up and run with it, didn't they? They really, and they were so inspired by it, and taking the ownership of it. And you said something there too that's very, very prevalent, which is the food poverty in areas that we don't really even know it exists. How do you manage to, how did you manage to, within this, find the areas that were most needy? Because you also did a lot for the under 24s in an age group in London, didn't you?
We did indeed. So we didn't furlough all our staff. We took the decision not to do that. So the whole of the sales team stopped selling Thomas Franks as a catering company, and it started selling to charities and finding where the food poverty was required. So we put the whole team onto that. And within a few weeks, we had taken relationships up with the Mayor's Fund in London, for example, which is known as Kitchen Social. And there are 400,000 young adults in London suffering food poverty every day. And we linked up with the Mayor's Fund and promised that we would feed about 10,000 children with some funding we got from Bearings in London, who have been amazing. Mark Williams and Sarah Stewart, Tom Fink and his leadership team have been outstanding in providing around about £80,000 towards the money we've raised so far. So those 10,000 meals were long eclipsed. We've now found more funding, and we're still doing what we think will go to about 30,000 meals in London for those children. But the sales team found the charities, they found the need, and they ensured that the relationships were there, that we knew who wanted it and how to get it to them.
It certainly goes to show that by, again, the collaboration, the joining together, that your fabulous sales team, and then them working together with the charities who are on the front line, they know what's going on behind the scenes, and then you're able to take your idea forward. And Tommy Frank, this has been absolutely phenomenal, and you must sit and I hope you do pause and take a moment to reflect on what good you have brought. What happens next? Next week, the 15th of June, sees the world beginning to maybe reopen. The doors are starting to reopen. What's the next? How can you continue the legacy of the Thomas Franks Foundation?
So I asked the trustees of the Thomas Franks Foundation to rechart its aims and its ambitions for next year. So feeding communities will form part of most of what we do moving forward. And we're seeking funding to try and get us to deliver 1 million meals. That's our target now, through the Thomas Franks Foundation. We've got the kitchens, we've got the people, and we just need to make sure that the funding's in place to do that. So the trustees have agreed to that, and they've got no problem with that. And I think one of the key things we have to do is to remember that the need to provide food aid will never go away unless we all collaborate towards doing so. But interestingly, every client I speak to, and I think the industry could help on this, as we come together on this, every client I speak to wants to be a part of delivering food aid to those in food poverty. So I spoke to one of our clients this morning, a boarding school in Reading, who wants to open up their kitchens in the evening and the weekend to allow us to produce meals to then deliver that to local people in need. But the interesting thing was, we talked about why can't we get the children to cook the food and perhaps get them a qualification. So there could be an MBQ alongside this food aid project. And I think that resonated with him well because he's an educator, but it also will mean there's a legacy of giving and producing food in each area. So it's things like that that we'll do and make sure we continue doing.
And again, that all comes back to everything you've talked about, which is, it's almost like the food chain, isn't it? From the earth to the table. This is the children in the schools, learning to cook, learning about giving, learning about the charity, in some of the schools where you're able to do that with the clients. But also, you talk about a lot of people do want to collaborate, and a lot more people need to, because it's often been described, sometimes our market can be quite broken, not broken, but people going off in maybe silos and doing great work, but quite separate. How can people come together be it clients or individuals, or for the funding? How can people come and join forces with the Thomas Franks Foundation?
Well, the first thing is they can give us some money, which is great, and we'll make sure that goes to feeding people. But I think one of the things that we could do is we could all come together as an industry and agree that this charity work does need to continue. If you look on the web, there are so many companies and so many individual pubs, for example, that have opened their kitchens. Empty Kitchens in Scotland has been superb, and they want to keep doing this. Once you've been involved in producing great food for those in food poverty, you don't want to stop doing it. And I think most of those volunteers would happily give up 2 hours a week to go and produce 50 meals. And if we times that by the number of employees and companies in the industry, we could eradicate food poverty with a simple piece of funding and an agreement that, you know, we work together in that aim, or on that aim, perhaps. That's my view.
Of course, and I think we can see from all the work that all of your teams have been doing. The food, the quality, if you we looked at many of the videos, and in fact, a couple of our lovely people went and did some of the volunteering, and they had an absolute whale of a time. The fun and working together with your team over at the Streatham School. And the food was amazing, you know. Was it, in terms of putting all the foods together and the food planning, was that something that you kept as simple as you could in terms of all the costings and, of course, the dietary? What was the greatest challenges you had around it?
So the chef director, Gavin Young, had 2 days with his team of development chefs to put together 12 menus, costed, measured, weighed, practiced, photographed, and that was sent out to the business. And there's been some regional changes because, you know, people have adapted those menus. But they cost no more than £2 for a nutritious whole meal in an eco container that can feed somebody for a day. Some of those clever chefs have got that cost down to £1.50, which has meant they can produce more food. But you can do it for no more than £2 because the labour's free, the distribution was free from our suppliers. All of our supply chain lent us their vans, and drivers who were on furlough volunteered to deliver this food. It was a great collaboration. But the food costs were all done by Gavin and his team, and they practiced it and they rehearsed it. And there's a bit of internal competition to see who can get those costs as low as possible without affecting quality, because it means they can then feed more people.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you could certainly feel the competition that was going on from region to region and how exciting it was between people. It was fantastic, and long may it rain. And moving on now with obviously the 15 years of valuable experience, and as you said, it went from 60 million to 5 minutes later, 15 seconds or 20 seconds later, it was pretty much, what do we have today? How do you envisage not relaunching, but I guess reopening your business and getting back to normal, getting back to life?
So we've got clear plans as to how to do that, safe plans, and all our clients have had those plans, and our people are now opening around about 70 locations this week up and down the country. The volumes are very low. I think most people know that, and it's quite depressing to see, but it's a good practice. It's good practice to trade with PPE and social distancing, or physical distancing, it should be called. And I think that if we can hold our heads and not react too quickly, there shouldn't be too much change. The quality shouldn't be affected, and the employees that we have should be retained, because we'll need them when this crisis is over. So one of the things we've done is to look at diversifying our business model. And the first thing we did was we asked our FD, who's a fantastic lady, to allow Thomas Franks to go not-for-profit for the next 2 years. And the deal there is that means that the profit we do make will go into employing our people to stop an Armageddon of redundancies, which I wouldn't be able to bear if I had to do that. So we're avoiding that as much as possible. We've asked our teams to think about how they can become, as individuals, salespeople in their own right. So we do private schools and head offices and fine dining, and we love that. But why can't we do other other sectors and provide great food in those sectors. So when I mentioned this to these wonderful, intelligent people, they looked at me with wide eyes and said, how can we do that? And I said, you've just delivered 110,000 beautiful meals with no planning and not much time. I think you can diversify if you put your minds to it, if it means saving jobs.
Wow, I think what a strong message to take on care. The moral values and that come through are so strong in terms of the not-for-profit for 2 years. And that is a phenomenal message to all of your teams and to all of your clients, where this is about getting us all protected with our security of our jobs for the next 2 years and keeping our heads above water. And no truer words could be said about that's probably the only way it's going to be able to happen, to minimize what government are telling us could be quite huge redundancies. And it certainly goes to show that if many more companies were able to adopt the not-for-profit, I think we'd all be in a much better place. And the diversifying as well, it's so key too, in terms of, well, you can believe in yourselves, 110,000 meals, you can do anything. It's been absolutely unbelievable to hear the story. I've got they call it the heebie-jeebies of when you hear something that is really touches the soul, as they say. I think what you've done is really incredible. The team and how they've all pulled together. This shows real teamwork, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. Very much so.
And if there was one last message you'd like to give, and I think we're also going to just maybe take 5 or 10 minutes. If anybody would like to have any questions, you can pop a question in the chat box. If there's anything, I had one question that had come through, which was, if I can ask you that, which was, how do you envisage seeing the market changing in the coming 12 months?
Well, I'm not, the leader of the industry, but my own opinion is that I think B&I will take a knock. It will change, and I think that companies can't really force their employees to use public transport, particularly at the moment. So working from home will continue for longer than we would like as caterers, and we want those customers back. We want those kitchens open in B&I. So I think we'll all adopt technology to deliver food. And we'll all do that very well, I think. We're a clever bunch, a clever, resilient bunch, the catering industry. So that will be something which will happen. I think we'll see delivered food models going to home as well, because I think that's part of well-being and part of mental health, that companies will want to feed their staff at an affordable cost. But it will come back. I think the industry will come back. The issue about hospitality in large numbers is that will take longer. So we were doing a presentation yesterday to a new client, which we don't know whether we want it or not, and we just enjoyed the day being out doing this live face-to-face presentation. And I said to this client, there'll be no annual ball in this private school this year, because you can't do that. But why can't you have a virtual ball where you still charge the same amount and you deliver the food to each of the 150 or 200 people attending from the kitchen you have? We forget that as an industry, we have thousands of kitchens and thousands of brilliant, qualified, dedicated, industry-beating chefs that will do anything to keep their jobs. So we have to think out of the box. That's my view.
Yes, it's so true. You really do have to start thinking out of the box, because you're right in that it is going to be very slow, and some people are saying that the new way of working may never ever revert to the old way. And what's your view on that?
Well, I mean, my own view is that I want every head office to be open with a catering department and with thousands of people eating our food. That's what we all have to wish for and work towards. I think there's a moral issue here, that facilities managers need to debate more than we can, perhaps, which is working from home while the sun's shining and you're being paid and it's more relaxed is great, but there'll be an end to that. I think productivity hasn't been measured, and I think that's something which will be looked at in years to come. And I believe that working from an office is better for people's well-being. But also, people didn't buy their houses to have an office in. They bought their house to live in. And the risk assessments associated with future home working forever have not been tested. And I think it could cause more trouble than perhaps is being debated. So I think we'll see a return to offices, but in a different way, perhaps with flexible working. But we want those offices open and those kitchens open. That's our catering wish.
Of course, of course. And all the children back in school.
Absolutely, without doubt, yeah.
Yes. There was one lovely last one that you mentioned to me, which was your new motto, for want of a better word. Tell us about that one.
Well, it was my eldest daughter, actually. I was doing a Zoom call with the Food Ethics Council, and she was listening into the whole thing because they're nosy, aren't they?
Yes.
And she thinks that we should be known as the ethical quality caterer of choice, and I like that. But I think the whole industry actually has embraced ethics during this crisis, and this kindness that's been shown by everybody is something which we should all be proud of. And I think the whole industry needs to be known as the ethical industry, because we are. But that was something which Amy came up with, and we quite like it. And it sort of highlights our core values. And I think those core values of many companies have shone during this crisis, the way they've looked after their people. The critical trade-off from embracing ethics during a crisis is that you'll be remembered for the right things, not for the wrong things. And I think that will deliver more in terms of future growth for people than any marketing collateral could do, in my opinion.
I think, yeah, you've got an abundance of core values, and that absolutely shows through. And I think you're absolutely right. The ethics are what carries us through tough times. It's the friendly neighborhood, charitable people that you always remember in times. And your mother is one very, very clever lady.
She is, yeah.
Who said one day, "Get off your arse." We have to applaud her for that too. That really, we've taken a lot of your time. It's been absolutely so humbling. I hope everybody has enjoyed it. I've asked the extra few questions. Is there anything else?
I think if
we have any more
if anyone's got any questions, you can unmute yourselves. Shan, I know you had a question. Perhaps you want to unmute yourself and ask.
Oh, okay.
Hello, everybody. So the financial analysts and the government are talking about going through, we're going to have a massive, huge recession, and one that we've not seen in years, with approximately about 5,000 redundancies. This is to Paula, and thank you, you answered already. How are you going to be able to be robust for that in our business?
Shall I start that, Paula?
Yes, please.
Well, I joined the catering industry many years ago because people need to eat, and I think there'll always be a need for people to eat and dine and socialise. I think that we could be a lot safer than we think if we look at diversifying our skills into other sectors and working together more. I think we could reduce those redundancies if we thought more about retaining talent as opposed to trying to retain profitability. The government, and I'm not a politician, made it quite clear that we should think twice about letting our staff go too quickly. They've given us a huge leg up with the furlough scheme and with loans, interest-free loans, in order to allow us to keep trading or to find new ways of trading. And once we've expended all those things, I think then, and only at the last point, we look at removing staff, but we're doing it potentially too quickly. Paula?
Thank you.
Yeah, and I totally agree too. I loved your comment too, Frank, about giving back, not cutting back, as best as we can. And the government have been incredibly supportive. And it will be it will be about retaining as much as possible, and slowly working together to try to all accept that it will take some time. And I hear that from so many clients that we're talking to. So thank you for your question, Shan. Any other questions? Robin's my...
Yeah, no, there's are there any other questions from the floor? There's none in the chat box. Frank, that was brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure. And thank you all for joining. I hope it was of use. And
it was. If there's no other questions, Frank, thank you very much. Thanks everybody for joining. Thanks to Paula for being a brilliant bit of a journalist in you there.
I don't know about that.
Well done. Thank you.
Well, it makes it certainly a lot easier when you've got an incredibly easy person to talk to. Frank, thank you. And thanks to my team for all the support. Thank you very much.